right, perfect. Here we are. Hi, my name is Alex Wisch. I am the founder and performance specialist for WishFit, and we're here doing an interview. I'm getting interviewed by the amazing Cindy Garvin, who is a clinical psychologist, and I'm going to let her kick it off.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. So I'm wondering, first, can you just give us sort of a definition of what performance coaching is?
Yeah, so performance coaching, it's different than trainer. It's a different than the trainer, and it's a different than a life coach. Performance coaching is basically what I do is I work with individuals on achieving the optimal mindset, a mindset to increase productivity or to optimize performance. So if it's working with an executive or a professional, we're looking on leveraging off productivity. Instead of working more hours, how can we make those hours more productive and get in this idea of mindset with flow? And if it's for like an athlete, we're looking at how to optimize performance. So they're in that zone as they compete and they're optimally performing as they train.
Wonderful. And how did you get into this?
So I got into this, it originally, so kind of a little backstory about myself. I have personally dealt with some pretty severe depression. I've also dealt with some significant ADHD. And over that time, something that really helped me was exercise. So fitness was always a really big piece of the equation that really helped me. And I noticed that when I got into really, and it wasn't just kind of casual exercise, it was very intense exercise. And when I got into this exercise, I would notice that I would feel better. And I would notice that after these bouts of exercise, I'd become more productive. And I started to gradually kind of introduce that concept into my life. And eventually what I learned was, exercise or intense exercise or things that utilize skill sets was one trigger to flow. And flow is the idea of being fully immersed in an activity where you're performing your best and you're feeling your best. So I was using exercise, regardless of dealing with ADHD and severe depression at the time, in order to launch myself to be more productive. Now, during that time, I also started to use exercise for flow in order to do more exercise. So I'm at a point in my life where I'm more able to kind of fine tune it and find the right amount to kind of engage the activities I want to do. That's just one type of trigger for flow.
So when you talk about flow, can you give me a definition of what that is, what it looks like?
Yeah, so flow is a concept that was really coined around 1975. It has many different terms. Many different people might call it being in the zone. It's also called Centauri. It's this idea of when you're doing an activity, so you could be playing a sport, you could be writing a book. It's very common actually if you're engaged in a conversation with somebody else, but you're so immersed in the activity that everything around you just kind of melts away. And before you know it, like 2 hours have passed and you've either been really productive or you've been fully engaged or you've had an amazing conversation. But in this level of flow, you're also getting dopamine and norepinephrine. So you're getting a lot of these feel-good chemicals that also boost your focus, boost levels of creativity. One other quick thing about flow to kind of put the pieces together is flow, being in this flow state is not that different to being in a state of meditation. When they did SPECT scans, they actually showed SPECT scans to be very, very similar, except part of the frontal lobe in flow is activated that allowed for more creative thinking than you were in meditation. But it's basically in this flow state, your brain is just being as efficient as possible. It's utilizing its energy in the most efficient way.
So it sounds like with performance coaching, it goes beyond life coaching. It goes beyond being a personal trainer. It's sort of a combination of mind and body in order to achieve an optimal state of flow.
Yeah, I would say that performance coaching has an overall arching piece. I think there's components of life coaching and there's components of, being a trainer and knowing exercise and knowing how to utilize different triggers and to create a healthy lifestyle. With this idea of flow, part of what I teach people is how to create triggers in your life to get into flow. But a large piece of it is utilizing positive psychology, utilizing cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, different components to create a lifestyle that fosters flow. Because what we look for is consistency. Consistency is what breeds success. You can have one moment of a great thought, but if you don't have the ability to pursue it and create that momentum, then you're not going to be able to do much with it. So learning how to do flow on a consistent basis is what we're talking about.
And who can benefit from learning how to get into this flow state?
Many people can. I've worked with, on that, like anywhere from, I know right now we're still in the midst of this whole pandemic. So like a lot of individuals have, had to transition to working at home. And when it was working, when you were working in the office, the idea is you had to be there for a certain amount of hours and you had to produce, right? But now this whole transition has gone into working at home where there is no, you don't have to work for a certain number of hours. There are meetings, certain things you have to be involved in, but it's really about now how much you can produce. So there's distractions at home, there's new environments, there's a lot of different challenges. And this is one incident where, it's let's cap the hours of the day. And instead of working more hours, how do we get that productivity in that amount of time?
So it sounds like you're teaching people how to utilize each hour of every day. So work smarter, not longer.
Yeah, there's actually, there was a 10-year study, it's called the 10-year McKinsey study that was done with executives. And over these 10 years, what they did is they measured flow and productivity. And they found that people, these executives, when they were in a flow state, that they were able to become 500% more productive. And now on top of that, there's something called the Research Flow Collective, where they've even said that they've had some people be able to be 3,000 times more productive. So that's 30x more productive in a given hour. So.
And when we're talking about productivity, what exactly are we saying? Are we saying, how many reports you can write? Are we saying number of miles you can run? How are we defining productivity?
Yeah, I guess productivity can depend on what you're trying to do. Whether you're an author, a professional athlete, executive or a professional or, stay-at-home mom, productivity is going to be a little different for different people. And overall, kind of way I look at it is, what you put in versus what you get out. So we have kind of two fundamental concepts, like hours in versus what you produce would be a given amount of, that's your productivity. So if we can reduce the amount of hours you put into something and be just as productive, productivity goes up, or have just the same amount of output, the productivity goes up. So there's ways to kind of play with that.
Have you seen this firsthand with any of your clients? Have you been able to sort of reduce the input but maintain the output?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So it kind of jumps into two concepts, and I just also want to mention that this is a series that's going to evolve over the next several weeks, and we'll jump more into more of these concepts. But today's kind of more of an overview. But there is a concept. There's two concepts. One is called the Bannister effect, and the other one's called the Parkinson's law. And the Bannister effect, and I'll explain these two concepts because this will kind of just slightly give a little bit of explanation of what I'm talking about. And I'll base it off an example too. The Bannister effect was based off this person named Bannister, who was the first person to run a 4-minute mile. And before that individual was able to run a 4-minute mile, no one thought it could be done. The doctors were telling him you're going to die. They had the ambulance there, all these crazy things going on.
I don't think I could run a 14-minute mile.
And then when Bannister ran this 4-minute mile, all of a sudden, like within days, other people started to be able to run 4-minute miles. Now, it wasn't like all of a sudden like some miracle happened and people were given this gift of being able to run a 4-minute mile. It was that because someone was able to run a 4-minute mile or did it, then other people believed that they could accomplish this task. So a big part of leveraging time, becoming more productive is one, it's setting high goals. It's challenging yourself. And then the other example is, well, the other piece of this puzzle is something called the Parkinson's law, which is if we create a time block and we say, I'm going to finish, like I worked with a vice president of a biotech company recently, and she would give herself 2 hours to finish progress reports, right? And because she gave herself 2 hours, and that's the amount of time she's always set for herself, what happens with this Parkinson's law is whatever project we give ourselves, it fills that bout of time. But what it shows is that productivity spikes at the beginning and then it really diminishes at the end. So by taking the banister effect, telling this individual, saying, look, let's try getting really ambitious here. Let's say you can finish these reports in 1 hour, all right? And I want you to try to do a little, there's other tools to use like positive self-talk. I want to try to get her a little hyped up, convince herself that she could do this, and then we take this Parkinson's effect and we kind of just take those 2 hours and bring it down to 1 hour. And I give her the assignment to finish those reports in 1 hour. And she actually finished it in like 48 minutes, where previously it took her 2 hours. So she was ecstatic. And that was something that was pretty unique.
That's phenomenal. So, I mean, I would think that most people would try to do things as fast as possible. What gets in the way of that?
Yeah, so that kind of goes in this whole concept of living this lifestyle that I work with people. I mean, there's many things. The idea, this overall arching idea is like cognitive load. It's this idea that, we can really only balance 4 concepts in our head at once. And, when it comes to digits, we can memorize about 7 digits, give or go 2. And along with this information, on a day-to-day basis, we have so much information that's thrown at us, tons and tons. And a good part of it, I mean, yes, there's ads out there, but we kind of feed into this. So with our phone, with our emails, there's like a regular worker will check their email like over 40 times in an hour. There's some ridiculous, concepts out there that people engage in. They don't even realize they're doing this. So simple things is like reducing friction, eliminating distractions, concepts of, planning ahead. So you're planning, so you don't have to plan in the moment. So you're able to get into a flow and just consistently work. Other things is, there's really simple things like making sure your food is prepped. You have plugs for your computers wherever you go, and then there's bigger things too, which is like narrowing down, like instead of checking your emails or text messages, living a life that's built around multiple distractions. It's, setting limits, saying I'm only going to check my phone or I'm only going to check my emails, 2 to 3 times a day, and letting people around you know that that's what you do, because overall you'll become more productive and have a greater output.
Sounds like multitasking really isn't the way to go in order to achieve flow. We're talking about total immersion in one activity, and that's what's really going to make someone successful.
Yes, no, I mean, totally immersion in one activity is just, the output's going to just sky high. It's just going to rocket, and you could do different activities. Yep.
I know you talked to me about this, but in order to sort of get into the mindset of even thinking about achieving flow, you sort of have to take care of the activities of daily living. Can you speak a little to that in terms of lifestyle changes?
Yeah, so this is an interesting concept. So there's a lot of people out there, and not to hate on them, just to kind of break down a different aspect of it. But there's people out there like, Ben Greenfield and a lot of other people out there that are advocating for like, biohacking. Like, how can we get this additional 1%, this additional 0.5%, these little things in our life, to make us perform better, right? I'm not, I think there's some merit to those things, but I think some of the people neglect some of the things that have a lot of research and a lot of merit. to me, what I look at is the biggest things that can move the needle the largest. So what we're looking at, are simple concepts. And I do this, I was doing this with my clients if I train them fitness-wise, mentally. We're looking at sleep, which is huge. People are looking like, how can I perform better? Well, it's like, my simple question is, are you getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a day? Because
definitely not.
Because even though you think you're going to be working, like by cutting your hours of sleep to like 4 hours, and let's say you're increasing the amount of hours you can work in the day, to like 16 hours, but really how many of those hours are that productive where you could sleep the amount you need and just be more productive or produce the same amount in a short amount of time?
Sort of goes back to your idea of consistency, because that sort of a lifestyle isn't sustainable.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable too. And the idea part of what I do too is helping people recognize burnout. The idea of recovery is a big piece of flow. Flow is something that heightens neurotransmitters, and you also need a period of recovery. You can't constantly be in that state. But going back to some of those basics though, just listing a few of them, we talk about sleep, I talk about nutrition, exercise, and the other big one is kind of stress management. And I think some of those ones, if those aren't in check, then any type of biohacking, whether you're using peptides for longevity or you're doing any other crazy thing, it's not going to really, it's a waste of money. People spend like thousands of dollars. So I know some executives that are dropping thousands of dollars a month on all these concoctions and stuff where really they need to pay attention to the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm. So I know we only have about 3 minutes left. I want to go back to the idea of flow, because even though we've talked about it as an individual getting into a state of flow and producing more, you also used the idea of flow in the context of sports. Is there a way that you can utilize this as a team, as a group of individuals, a group of executives?
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. So I'll touch base on the kind of company frontier, and I'll kind of just touch base quickly on also like a professional athlete frontier. And again, I don't want to just limit it to saying athletes, but these professionals, because writers can use this, people engaging in hobbies and activities can use this, and hobbies can be a great way to be a trigger flow. And there's multiple triggers. But for example, like an athletic team, so one thing is, when there's group flow, this idea of like a group, coming together and working, in unison, like one pass to another player, like everything looks like it's from like the same individual. Like everyone looks like it's almost like the telepathy, like they're just mentally connected and everything's just coming.
Hive mind. Yeah,
like hive mind. And there's ways and tricks to get people in that direction. There is, on the fitness frontier, like working with a team, being like, how can we get our team before every practice to get in flow so people can perform their best during practice? And one idea is like, before a training session, have the team go through a run in the woods. Because when you're going for a run in the woods, you all this different stimuli. You're using what we call like skills challenge. You're challenge yourself. So you have to look at the scenery. You're using different sensories, and it puts you into an environment. So it kind of triggers flow. On another note, in the professional world, Patagonia did something really cool. They have a great retention with their workforce. I mean, I think it's like, they maybe lose like 3% of employees. They also do an amazing job. But what they do is they have a rule in Patagonia that you can always take a surf break, right? So professionally, if you're in the middle of a meeting, if you're talking to your boss, whatever it is during the day, you're allowed to, whatever you want to do, take a surf break. And the idea behind that is that surfing is fully immerses your senses, and it's a great activity to get you in flow. So you take a surf break, right? You get in this awesome flow state. It's like a flow trigger. And then you come back to work and you ride out that flow and you're like that much more productive. So there's a lot of crossover in like groups, or, there's a lot of other team aspects to it too.
So I don't want to give too much away about your next segment, but I wonder if you can give us just a little snippet about what we're going to learn next time.
Yeah, so next segment, we're going to dive into more of this kind of cognitive load. So, each week we're going to have a different segment. And I will be posting a list of what the next several weeks will look like in a little description. But this idea of cognitive load, this idea of, really how do we create a lifestyle that reduces the amount of things we balance in our head at once? So anything from, in the research behind it, like there's ideas of gratitude, there's a lot of things in positive psychology, reducing things with technology that are more of a hindrance, and what can be helpful there, and just overall having that lifestyle that just fosters productivity and flow and success and happiness.
Wonderful. Well, I can't wait until the next segment then.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye-bye.
All right, take care, everybody.